Have you ever found yourself in that really perplexing situation where you've poured so much into a relationship, all your care, your support, your attention, only to feel the other person slowly, maybe subtly start to pull away? It's completely counterintuitive, isn't it? You think, wait, I'm giving more. Why am I getting less connection back? It can be genuinely painful and frankly, deeply.
It really can.
Well, today on The Deep Dive, we're unraveling exactly that mystery. We're taking a plunge into the profound psychological world of Carl Jung to understand why excessive caring can actually create distance instead of drawing people closer.
Yeah.
Our mission today is really to shine a light on those hidden psychological dynamics at play, and crucially, to show how we might transform our relationships for the better, making them truly healthy and deeply connected.
And I think it's crucial to understand right from the start, from a Jungian perspective, this isn't really about the other person being ungrateful or deliberately rejecting love. Not usually, anyway. It's more often a complex, often unconscious psychological response. It stems from a really fundamental human drive, that innate push we all have toward wholeness and autonomy. Their psyche is reacting, sometimes long before their conscious mind even figures out why.
That sets the stage beautifully for our deep dive, then. What we're really getting at today is the surprising truth. The very act of pouring yourself into someone can, kind of ironically, create distance. We'll explore core Jungian concepts like individuation, the shadow, psychological boundary, to reveal the surprising truths behind it. So let's explore this core premise first. Why is it so counterintuitive from a Jungian lens?
Well, for anyone familiar with Jung, individuation is central. It's that lifelong journey toward becoming our most complete autonomous selves.
Right.
What's often overlooked, though, is how seemingly positive actions, like excessive care, can actually obstruct this vital process for someone else. When someone cares too much, it's inadvertently perceived by the recipient's psyche not as support, but as an obstacle to their necessary psychological development.
An obstacle? How so?
It's seen as an interference with their drive to discover who they truly are, independent of others. It kind of gets in the way.
That's fascinating. So if I'm understanding this right, the very act of trying to, let's say, complete someone else might actually be a sign that we haven't quite completed our own journey.
That's a huge part of it.
It makes sense that if I'm not feeling whole myself, I might unconsciously try to merge with another person instead of, standing firmly on my own.
Exactly. Jung observed that truly healthy, fulfilling relationships are built when two individuated people, two psychologically whole individuals, choose connection from a place of wholeness, not from need.
Okay.
Without that foundation, relationships can easily become these unconscious attempts to complete oneself through the other person, or maybe to solve one's own internal problems by focusing intensely on someone else.
Right. It sounds like there's a lot more going on beneath the surface then. So when someone is giving too much, what are these hidden elements that the recipient's unconscious is picking up on?
Well, often within that excessive care, there are these subtle layers communicating things like neediness, or maybe a desire for control, or even the projection of unresolved psychological stuff from the caregiver. Think about it. If I'm constantly doing things for you that you could quite easily do for yourself, my actions might unconsciously convey, I need you to need, or maybe I don't quite trust you to manage on your own.
That undertone.
Precise. The recipient's unconscious immediately picks up on these hidden elements, these sort of unspoken messages. And the distance they create, it's often a form of self-protection.
Self-protection.
Yeah, it's like an unconscious refusal to enable the caregiver's avoidance of their own necessary psychological work. Their psyche naturally resists this kind of arrangement to maintain its own equilibrium and keep pushing for its own growth. #2. Unpacking the shadow, projections, and hidden motives.
So if excessive care often carries these hidden elements, where do they really come from? This leads us, I think, straight to one of Jung's most powerful ideas, shadow. We're talking about those unacknowledged aspects, right? Things like our own neediness, maybe control issues we don't see, our fears, or unmet desires we haven't.
Absolutely. And Jung suggested these aren't just things that vanish when we ignore them or push them down. Oh, no.
Right.
Instead, they often find ways to express themselves, sometimes through seemingly positive behavior. So that deep-seated fear of abandonment might actually manifest as intense, almost smothering devotion.
Okay.
Or a hidden desire for control could masquerade as constant concern. The conscious mind might genuinely believe it's offering pure, selfless care, but the unconscious, through the shadow, transmits that underlying content right along with it. The recipient feels both layers.
And that ties directly into projection, doesn't it? The idea that we project these unresolved parts of ourselves onto others, and then we end up relating to that projection rather than the actual person standing in front of us.
Precise. This means excessive care often becomes a way of trying to heal our own wounds through someone else. We're not truly seeing the other person for who they are. in their own right. We're seeing our own psychological needs reflected back at us, often unconsciously hoping they will fill whatever void we have inside. The person on the receiving end feels this. It's an immense weight.
I can imagine.
They sense they've become a screen for someone else's psychological drama, like maybe constantly being asked to affirm their partner's worth, even when they're just having a bad day and need some space.
Yeah.
This recognition triggers that powerful instinctual need to create distance. Jung was very clear on, we can only truly care for another when we've withdrawn our projection. And that requires doing the hard work of integrating our own shadow material.
It really sounds like every act of excessive care comes loaded with this invisible psychological baggage then. Beyond the conscious intentions, there are layers of unspoken expectations, maybe even demands.
That's right.
This must create an enormous burden for the recipient, making every interaction feel, loaded with hidden significance.
It does. It absolutely does. And Jung understood that psychological energy, both within us and between us, requires tension between opposites. Think of it like a battery. It needs two poles to generate energy, right?
Okay.
Our inner world and our relationships thrive on a certain dynamic tension. Things like connection and separation, knowing and mystery, presence and absence. These opposites create energy.
And excessive care.
Excessive care collapses this essential tension. When someone is always available, always caring, always present, they eliminate the natural psychological tension that creates attraction, interest, and dynamism. They become psychologically predictable, maybe even, dare I say, a bit flat or taken for granted.
So in a way, the psyche just stops truly seeing what is constantly overwhelmingly there. It's almost like an oversaturated landscape. There's no contrast, no room for new growth or discovery.
Exactly. Mystery and a degree of uncertainty are actually crucial for dynamic engagement. So the person pulling away isn't necessarily being cruel. Their unconscious is attempting to restore this vital tension. Distance reintroduces a bit of mystery, some uncertainty, the unknown.
Right.
This aligns perfectly with Jung's principle of enantiodromia. That's the tendency of things to turn into their opposite when taken to an extreme.
Enantiodromia. Okay.
So excessive care, which is meant to create closeness, actually paradoxically generates distance. Total availability inadvertently creates a feeling of absence.
Wow, that makes so much sense when you put it like that. Now let's layer in archetypal patterns. Jung's theory of archetypes reveals another really fascinating layer here, doesn't it? When someone cares excessively, you're saying they can often become almost possessed by a particular archetype, like the mother, the caregiver, or the savior. What does that actually mean for the relationship?
It means they lose access to the full spectrum of human experience and expression. The person becomes somewhat one-dimensional, always nurturing, perhaps, always helping, always available. This kind of archetypal rigidity creates an imbalance.
An imbalance? How?
It unconsciously forces the other person into complementary, often limiting roles, like the helpless child who always needs care, or the victim who constantly needs rescue. It's very limiting for both people, and it diminishes the other person's capacity to be their full, complex self.
And I imagine there's a shadow side to these archetypes that inevitably starts too.
Oh, absolutely there is. The nurturing mother archetype, in its shadow, can transform into the devouring mother who consumes the other person through excessive care. The noble savior becomes the persecutor, who secretly needs others to be broken or dependent so they can feel significant. And the selfless caregiver can become the controller, who manages through constant anxious concern. Recipients unconsciously sense these shadow dynamics, even if they can't name them, and they pull away from that suffocating influence.
It sounds like a violation.
It is. True psychological health requires being able to access and integrate multiple archetypes to be flexible. Excessive care can be a sign of an archetypal possession that prevents this necessary psychological flexibility.
This sounds like it gets right to the heart of psychological boundaries, which I think we all intuitively understand are so critical in any...
They absolutely are.
Yeah.
And Jung saw boundaries not as rigid walls to keep people out, but as essential containers that allow for individuation, for separateness, and paradoxically, for healthy intimacy. Excessive care often represents a fundamental boundary violation. It floods the relational space with the caregiver's own anxieties, their needs, their shadow material. This usually stems from the caregiver's own boundary depth. They struggle to distinguish between their own needs and feelings and those of the other person.
Like that blurring.
Exactly. This psychological fusion might feel like intense love or closeness initially, but it's actually a failure of individuation. The recipient instinctively feels it as an invasion, a profound threat to their own autonomy, their own sense of self.
And that brings us right to the unconscious need for autonomy, which you mentioned earlier is such a powerful human drive.
It's absolutely fundamental, a drive toward self-direct psychological sovereignty. It's essential for individuation. Excessive care directly threatens this deep need.
And it's not just selfishness, right?
Not at all. It's a deep psychological necessity, much like a plant needing its own space and root system to thrive. When care constantly implies that someone can't manage alone, that they need constant propping up, the psyche rebels. It creates distance to assert its capacity for self-sufficiency. The person pulling away is often, unconsciously, fighting for their psychological life, affirming their right to exist as a separate individual.
And a big part of that boundary dissolution seems to be this idea of emotional fusion, where individual identities just kind of blur together.
Precisely. In emotional fusion, one person's emotions become the other's responsibility. Their moods dictate the entire emotional climate of the relationship. Their needs become urgent imperatives for the other person.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And crucially, this isn't true intimacy, it's enmeshment, and it prevents both people from individuating properly. Often, the person who cares excessively seeks this fusion to avoid their own individuation, to avoid facing their own emptiness or needs. Recipients feel utterly suffocated. They find they can't have a bad day or need space or disagree without triggering what feels like a crisis in the caregiver. Jung emphasized that healthy relationships require what he termed participation, a profound sense of connection that, crucially, doesn't obliterate individual boundaries.
You know, thinking about this, it occurs to me that a lot of this dynamic is almost encouraged by our cultural program. We're often fed this idea that true love means total merger, becoming one with another person, finding your other half.
That's a very important point. Our modern culture often romanticizes total merger, the idea of completing another person, the notion that deep love means constant togetherness, constant sharing. These cultural myths definitely promote these unhealthy patterns,
making excessive caring seem normal or even the ideal.
Exactly. Jung would point to how cultural complexes, these shared unconscious beliefs, deeply shape individual behavior. Our culture often emphasizes merger over individuation, and unfortunately, we've largely lost the understanding of necessary solitude, of sacred space within relationships. The cultural pressure to visibly and constantly perform caring often leads to these anxiety-driven, sometimes inauthentic expressions of it.
And it also makes me think of another subtle dynamic, the projection of unlived life. Is it like the caregiver is subconsciously trying to fulfill their own unrealized dreams or potential through the other person?
That's a key insight, yes.
Yeah.
Jung observed that we often project our unlived dreams, the undeveloped parts of ourselves, our unrealized potential, onto those closest to it. Excessive care frequently masks this.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A parent hovering over a child might be unconsciously trying to relive their own youth or achieve things they couldn't. Or a partner making their beloved their entire world might actually be avoiding their own journey of self-discovery, their own creative pursuits or career development. This places an impossible, unspoken burden on the recipient. It asks them to live not just their own life, but also the unlived portions of another's. That's a heavy load.
That would certainly create distance, wouldn't it? And if someone is constantly trying to sort of manage another person's emotional state, it sounds like it's often a reflection of their own struggles with emotional regulation.
It very often is. Excessive care can mask an inability to manage one's own difficult emotion. The caring person might unconsciously need the other person to be okay, to be happy, so they can feel okay and stable.
Right, so they're outsourcing their stability.
Essentially, yes. They're making someone else responsible for their emotional equilibrium. Recipients inevitably feel pressured to manage or even suppress their own authentic emotions for the sake of the caregiver. And that becomes utterly exhausting over time. The pulling away, in this context, represents a desperate attempt to reclaim their own emotional autonomy.
This all sounds strikingly similar to what we now call codependence. Jung didn't use that specific modern term, obviously, but his work certainly outlined its core dynamic.
Absolutely. The patterns are identical. Excessive care often signals these codependent dynamics where one person's sense of self, their sense of okayness, becomes entirely dependent on another person's state or approval.
Which is a failure of individuation.
Exactly. It's a failure of individuation, where the caregiver's hidden needs dominate the relationship, even while they appear incredibly selfless on the surface. The recipient, despite the outward appearance of receiving so much love, often feels the hidden aggression in that constant unspoken demand for validation, for neediness coming from them. So when someone does pull away in response to this dynamic, from a Jungian perspective, perhaps the most helpful thing we can do is to reframe this pulling away as compensation.
Compensation,
meaning it's the psyche's ingenious, unconscious way of attempting to restore balance. Jung observed that whenever any psychological element becomes too dominant, too one-sided like excessive care, the unconscious automatically generates its opposite to compensate.
So excessive care triggers distance to create balance.
Precisely. It's not meant as punishment or personal rejection. It's actually profound psychological wisdom operating. It's like a medicine for the relationship system, trying to heal the imbalance. It prevents the relationship from becoming completely toxic and stuck, and potentially allows space for healthier growth down the line.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us then? If pulling away is compensation, Jung's solution isn't simply to care less, it's something else.
Exactly. It's not about caring less, but about caring more consciously. Yeah. It means developing an acute awareness of our deeper motivations when we care, understanding our projections, our shadow material. It's about learning to care from a place of genuine wholeness, from conscious choice, not from an unconscious need or compulsion. And importantly, this requires both people in the relationship to take responsibility for their own individuation journey.
And this leads to that really powerful ultimate paradox that Jung's psychology, it feels back.
It really does.
Yeah.
By needing others less, we actually become capable of loving them more authentically. By allowing for necessary distance and space, we create the very conditions needed for genuine closeness to flourish. By respecting autonomy, we enable real, authentic connection. And by becoming whole ourselves, psychologically speaking, we can truly meet another person from a place of abundance, not from deficit or need. It truly flips our conventional understanding of love right on its head.
It also clarifies a crucial false binary we often fall into. The fear is that the only choice is between, suffocating, overly involved care on one hand or cold, distant indifference on the other. But Jung offers a powerful third way.
He absolutely does.
Yeah.
He reveals the possibility of conscious caring, a way of relating that maintains genuine warmth while deeply respecting boundaries. It offers support while honoring autonomy. It stays truly present while allowing for crucial space and separateness. It's a much more mature, sustainable, and ultimately fulfilling way to connect with others.
So how does one actually do this conscious caring? What does it look and feel like in practice?
Well, this conscious caring emerges from deep self-awareness and psychological maturity. It really requires recognizing the difference between genuine concern for another person's well-being and the projection of our own unconscious stuff. Our anxieties, our needs, our complex.
Okay.
When we care consciously, we're responding to the actual person and their true need as best we can perceive them, not just reacting to our internal anxiety, unmet child. Jung made a distinction between relating from our personal unconscious content, our complexes, our fears, versus relating from genuine fear, which arises from the integrated self, from our wholeness.
So it involves self-reflection.
Constant examining our motivation. Is this act of caring really for them, or is it actually, maybe most, is it meeting their need or soothing my anxiety? #tag 5. Practical Jungian tools for trans.
Okay, so this definitely sounds like it involves significant inner work. Let's make it really practical. What are some powerful Jungian practices or tools to start applying? First off, you mentioned active imagination.
It's a really powerful tool for this. When you feel that compulsive urge to care excessively, to text again, to check in again, to fix something for them instead of acting on it immediately, try sitting with it.
Just sitting with the urge.
Yes. Close your eyes just for a few minutes and let an image arise that represents this urge. Maybe it's a grasping hand or a worried face or a feeling of emptiness. Then engage with that image in your mind's eye. Asking questions. What do you want? What are you afraid of? What do you really need?
And what might you discover?
Often you'll discover that the image represents a part of yourself, perhaps an inner child needing reassurance, or an internal parental figure needing to feel valuable, or maybe a shadow aspect that deeply fears abandonment. By recognizing these as internal figures needing attention, you can start to redirect that powerful energy away from trying to manage the external relationship and channel it into self-knowledge and internal integration.
That's a profound shift from outer to inner.
Yeah.
And then there's emotional self-regulation, which sounds pretty foundational to all of this.
It absolutely is. This is about developing the capacity to manage your own emotional states, especially anxiety or discomfort, without immediately needing another person to stabilize you or make it go away.
So feeling the feeling without acting.
Exactly. When you feel anxiety about someone you care about, maybe about their choices or their well-being, practice holding that anxiety internally.
Yeah.
Feel it, acknowledge it, breathe with it, but resist the urge to immediately act out of that anxiety, to relieve your own discomfort. This builds psychological muscle, and it often reveals something quite profound, that a lot of what we call caring is actually just our own anxiety management strategy in disguise.
Next up, the art of psychological boundary. We often think of boundaries as walls, but you're suggesting something different, right? More like containers.
Precisely. They aren't walls meant to shut others out entirely. Yeah. They are more like semi-permeable membranes or containers that actually allow for genuine intimacy because they protect individual integrity. You can practice what you might call differentiated caring.
Differentiated caring.
Yes, acknowledging another person's struggles or pain without absorbing it as your own. Offering support without taking responsibility for fixing their problems or managing their emotions. It means maintaining your own center, your own emotional ground, while witnessing another's experience. You consciously recognize what's yours to carry your feelings, your anxiety, and what belongs to them. Your anxiety about their choices is yours to manage internally, not theirs to fix by changing their choice.
And I imagine a lot of this circles back again to that shadow integration earlier, facing the less comfortable parts of why we care.
It absolutely does. The shadow side of excessive caring discussed often contains things like disowned neediness, dependency, perhaps a fear of being worthless if not needed, or deep vulnerability. Jung taught that we must integrate these aspects into our conscious personality rather than unconsciously project to other excessive caretaking.
So how do you start that?
Start by honestly acknowledging what you might truly be seeking when you feel that compulsion to care excessive. Is it validation, control, the need to be neat, a distraction from your own empty? Then try engaging in a dialogue with these shadow parts through journaling, active imagination, or therapy to understand their origins and integrate their energy more constructively. Remember, what we won't face internally, we inevitably end up living out external, often to the detriment of our relationship.
So if someone is pulling away because of your excessive care, what about the practice of conscious withdrawal? It sounds a bit counterintuitive again, but maybe necessary.
It can be. And it's the art of learning to consciously create space while still maintaining genuine warmth. This isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about mindfully reintroducing that vital psychological tension and respect for autonomy we talked about. So it might mean pacing your care more appropriately. Maybe sending one thoughtful text instead of 5 anxious ones. It might mean allowing some time to pass before responding sometimes, resisting the urge for immediate contact, or intentionally creating periods of healthy absence, allowing both individuals to reconnect with themselves. Absence used consciously is just as important as present. It allows for missing, for conscious choice, and for both individuals to replenish their own inner.
And the energy that used to go into all that excessive caring, where does that go? It must be a lot of energy.
It is. And it doesn't need to just dissipate. It needs redirect. Jung strongly emphasized the importance of channeling psychological energy into things like creative expression, meaningful work, personal development, spiritual practice, whatever feeds your soul.
Filling your own cup first, essentially.
Yes. When your own life feels full and meaningful on its own terms, you naturally care from a place of abundance rather than from emptiness or need. You become inherently more interesting to yourself and, by extension, genuine and less burdened.
This all helps me understand much better how we can maintain warmth without fusion. That's often the fear, isn't it? That if we pull back a bit, we'll become cold or distant.
That's a critical point and a common fear. But Jung's psychology clearly shows that true warmth doesn't require fusion or enmeshment. You can be deeply loving without being consumed or consuming. You can be caring without being compulsive or controlling.
So where does that warmth come from?
Genuine warmth comes from the integrated self, offering a kind of objective love, amor fati, perhaps that sees and accepts the other person as they truly are, struggles and all. It's warm but not possessive, caring but not controlling, present but not invasive. It's a warmth that is secure enough in itself to allow and even value distant, because your own well-being doesn't depend entirely on their constant closeness or approval.
And I'm sure you'd emphasize that this is an ongoing practice, not some kind of one-and-done overnight.
Oh, absolutely. Individuation is a lifelong process. There will inevitably be moments when you slip back into old, familiar patterns of relating. That's human. But catching yourself in those moments isn't failure. It's actually a golden opportunity for greater consciousness and choice.
Seeing the pattern is the first step.
Exactly. It requires constant vigilance, really, but vigilance of self, not of others. Monitoring your own internal state, your motivations, your projects, so you can learn to care more cleanly, more consciously, and more respectfully over.
And this leads us right back to that final, really beautiful paradox of transformation. By needing to care less in that clingy, anxious way, you actually become capable of caring more deeply and authentically.
Precisely.
By addressing your own needs internally, you become free to truly respond to others' actions rather than just your fantasies or projections about what they need. This doesn't make you cold or selfish. It makes you clear, conscious, and truly capable of authentic, mature love.
Well said.
This deep dive into Jung really shows us that the very pulling away that seems so painful, so rejecting, might actually be exactly what's needed for both people to grow toward wholeness. It's like the psyche's powerful demand for a more conscious, profound invitation, really.
Indeed. And perhaps the ultimate question isn't just how do I stop others from pulling away when I care too much, but rather, am I willing to do the necessary inner work that makes such pulling away unnecessary in the first? That's the real challenge and the real opportunity.
So thinking about all this, what's one practical step you listening can take? Maybe just to examine your own motivations for caring in one relationship, or perhaps to consciously create just a little more sacred space, a little more breathing room in one of your connections. We invite you to explore this for yourself.